Ooh, 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 ooh. Ladies, gentlemen, gamers, and fellow Poppy Playtime and horror game enthusiasts, welcome back. So, I have recently played Poppy's Playtime Chapter 4, the newest installment. Now, there's a couple of things different with this Poppy's Playtime that I want to get into, and one of the biggest things, especially for those who saw my playthrough of it, and will potentially see my potential, and I really want to stress that, edit of it, where I basically chop up the whole streams into a highlight reel. I don't know if I'm going to do that because it's a lot of work, and I'm busy, and I'm employed, but we'll see. I like to follow tradition, but this is where, as some people who saw the stream might notice, I was extremely, extremely sick during the entire playthrough of Poppies. Now, I don't know if that really affected things too much. I don't think it did, but be forewarned because, and I'm already kind of spoiling this review a little bit, but I think I'm going to be, maybe from what I've heard, in the minority with my opinions about Poppy's Playtime Chapter 4. So, in general, what did I think of it? I got to the party a little bit late, although I don't think it really mattered because it was still in the prime time of Poppy. I don't know when exactly this review is going to go out because I'm hoping to also put this on top of some Poppy gameplay, so hopefully that's in the background here right now. But in general, to kind of get the cat out of the bag here, compared to the other chapters, I don't think I liked Poppy's Playtime Chapter 4 nearly as much as I did. And again, this could be for a variety of reasons. It could either be because I was sick as a fucking dog while playing it. It could also be I'm just immune to the horror genre because I've done a decent amount of it. It could also be because Poppy's just isn't that good anymore, and we'll kind of get into that. Or it could also be because Poppy's itself is going on too long. So not really the horror genre, but just the game itself is kind of peaked. That could be the case. So, following from the previous Poppy's installment of Chapter 3, where I believe we fought Catnap, and it's been a while, so I don't really remember. Also, slight spoilers here, just to be forewarned. We fought Catnap, and we got really into the lore. Now, from one thing I've been hearing, which I will probably fully agree with Chapter 4, I think the lore for Chapter 4 has probably been excellent. I don't know if it's as good as Chapter 3. I think, personally, Chapter 3/2 is probably the best. Chapter 1 was very iconic, right? It was new. It was very, very indie. And one thing I will say, and there's a little asterisk I do have to add to this, but over time, Poppies has seemed to improve in quality to an extent, and we will get into that. But for the most part, and let me just do some research here. Poppy chapter. I should have done this before I really went online, but let me see Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is Mommy Longlegs, right? So I remember her, she was fine. Chapter 3, I think, was the one that was really cool. Was that the one with the teacher? Let me see. It was the one with the teacher. I think Chapter 3 is probably peak for me. I think, even though it wasn't necessarily hard, and that's another complaint I kind of have with Chapter 4 here, I think Chapter 3 was probably maybe the scariest one for me, slash also the one with the most variety. I also think it probably might have been the longest as well, with Miss Delight. I really liked Miss Delight as well. But the biggest thing I think that happened with Chapter 4 is it really suffered from a lot of different things. Now, I don't know if I'm a pro gamer, and you're going to keep hearing me say this, I don't know. Because again, the sickness might be taking over, my god gaming skills might have come in clutch, but Chapter 4 was probably, to me, one of the shortest chapters out there. From just my initial viewing of how long it took me, I think it took me a good amount of like 6 hours. And to take me 6 hours, that's saying something because I usually go slow. I try and explore. I sit down. I blow my nose. I wipe my ass. I do what I need to do. So I usually equate it to like double the normal time of a normal person. I feel like Chapter 4, and I don't think it's gone down in price too. I did get it on sale because I got it so early, but normally these DLCs are about $20, 15 if you get it early enough. And for $20/15, I don't think it's really worth the time you put in. Now, is it quality? I guess kind of. And if you like the Poppy lore, it is good. And it really did advance the lore, like holy fucking shit. But I feel like just content-wise, amount-wise, it really did not hit. And the boss fights in the game too. again, I don't know what it was. There was a lot of instances where I felt like there was areas where I went to where I'm like on edge. I'm like, oh my god, something might happen here. Something's gonna come out. Something's gonna make this difficult. I'm gonna get chased. I might get jump scared. Whatever. And there really wasn't much of that. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, this looks like a perfect spot for a jump scare or for a chase scene or for something. And it just felt like that didn't happen. Now, in chapter 4, I believe there's about, from what I could count, and I kind of don't want to use this too much because I feel like there's a repeat enemy. I would say loosely there's 2 to 3 kind of bosses that you fight. And I'm not going to spoil who, but there's like 2 to 3 bosses. One of them, I personally believe, was a fucking joke. And it's this boss where it's like, it's in this big area. And one thing I will say is the scale of the game actually, I feel like, did improve. I feel like there was barely any loading times, and the loading times were kind of seamless a little bit, and we'll get into that. But the areas were decently big too. I didn't feel too restricted. It almost, I don't want to say it felt open world, but it really felt like the areas for the boss fights and the boss encounters sometimes were a lot bigger than what I was used to, and I was surprised. And in one way it was good, but another way it was bad. When the character moves faster than the boss, I think it's a major issue. And a big part of my fear went away once I realized these boss fights are really just easy. I would say at most, if we're being generous, there's 4 encounters in this game. I believe we should take away one though, because one of them is kind of with an enemy that's kind of similar to something we had in a previous chapter. I'm not going to say what, but I would say hardcore. There's probably 3 encounters, which again isn't crazy, but I feel like the enemies and the encounters and everything weren't that memorable, weren't that scary. It just was kind of whatever. And again, this is kind of the issue overall with the game. It was extremely fucking buggy. There was a lot of times in these encounters, in these boss fights, the boss just glitched out. There was literally multiple times, and again, this could get patched over time, but as a, kind of in the beginning experiencer, I feel like this kind of detracted from my experience. Where there's times where I'm running and the boss would just glitch out. And there's times where I'm going into like a vent or something and the boss just wouldn't know what to do. And it would literally be stuck in place, and I would go and I would like finger its booty hole and it just couldn't move. It was like stuck. I'm like, okay, wow, this kind of takes away a big fear factor. I'm looking at it, I'm observing it, I'm drawing naked pictures of it, I'm doing a lot of things to it, and it's just stuck there. And there was a certain point with a certain boss encounter where the boss just didn't show up. And I'm like, what the fuck? So again, it really felt like at some points bosses should have shown up, and maybe they were supposed to, and it just glitched out. Because I could tell when it glitched out, like I could tell when the game was bugging out. But there was again other times where, especially in a certain area filled with certain gas, and you have to go from room to room, kind of searching for something. I was like, oh, this is the perfect encounter to get chased by something. And at a different point, you do. It's not like it never happens. But at certain points, I don't know if they thought it would feel redundant, but it almost feels like you're copy and paste sort of just general horror game. And the enemies weren't too scary either. Some of them kind of were, I guess. But I feel like it really lost the flair and the charm of just being scary gameplay. And it's weird to describe. Like, I don't know if it's from the chasings. Because again, if I'm getting chased and me running is faster than the monster, I have no fear anymore. And it really is sad that that's the case. And again, the game was super buggy. There's multiple times where the boss literally just glitched out. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Another thing, though, I think just certain things, especially with the boss fights, and I'm kind of harping a lot on that, but we will get to other stuff. It's just the bugs in the game were so bad, and the boss fights, and just the general direction sometimes. I didn't know exactly where to go, and this is kind of a negative to what I said before, where the areas are so big and it kind of feels like it gives you a lot of freedom. I think that at a certain point, having a closed one direction sort of horror game kind of helps you. And, I wouldn't consider myself completely stupid, even though I am pretty slow. There's certain times where I literally did not know where to go, and just by, the good graces of God or Poppy, I somehow made it to where I needed to go, but I was never sure. And it's so weird because it's not like they really tell you overtly. There's a lot of times where they just don't tell you what to do, and things kind of maybe seem obvious, but they're not. It feels like a certain lapse in judgment. Like there's some parts where I feel like either they didn't test it out because, or maybe they did, but they didn't really see it because they're the ones who made the game. They understand it. It's a very, very weird effect that I feel like wasn't in the other games where I was like, okay, kind of where do I go? What do I do? Am I going to be able to come back to this area? Did I miss something? there was multiple times where I got a tape and I'm like, okay, I might put in the TV here, but the TV's behind this thing. And this is where it's kind of a positive, where there's other things to do than just the main story. There's like little, I don't want to call them side quests, but there's like little rooms and little lore you can unlock that's extra. But you never fully know what's extra and what's not, and what you have to do and what you don't. Because sometimes the areas are so big and there's no clear direction. I felt a little confused sometimes. And again, even with all this bullshit and me meandering, the game only took me like 6.5 hours, and I was shocked. I was like, what the fuck, that's it? I literally finished it in 2 playthroughs. That's unheard of for like anything past part one, because part one is decently short. So I feel like a lot of the bugs, a lot of the boss fights, some of the directions, some of just like the explanation was kind of off. Not in terms of lore, though. The lore is something I will give the game. It was absolutely great. We learned a lot more about what they do. We learn more about what we know with what they're doing with the children. We learn a lot more about what they're potentially doing. Maybe not why, or maybe I missed it, because sadly I missed a couple of the lore tapes, but we get to see more about like the creators, more about the experiments, a lot more of what I personally like and what I think other people like with Poppies. I think the lore is something they nailed down greatly. I think the way it ended was absolutely amazing. It feels like we're making progress, and it feels like we're getting towards the end. I'd be surprised if there's more after chapter 5, but this might turn into another Five Nights at Freddy's thing where it spawns a whole thing. Who the fuck knows? And if it does, I'm glad, but we'll see if I really continue to do that or edit it. But overall, I think a lot of glaring issues were with Poppy Chapter 4, gameplay wise, especially. Lore wise, voice acting wise, all high quality, except there was another bug, sadly, with the audio that I just remembered. After my first playthrough with the game, the audio was fine. When I came back for my second and final playthrough of it, and when I say playthrough, I don't mean I'm repeating the game, I mean like sessions, right? When I came back for my second session, the audio was so fucked up and everything was completely low. Even after several restarts of the game, nothing fixed this, and it was wildly different where the audio for the people talking was just extremely low, and I didn't really change anything. I even tried to raise it. And again, it just detracted from the experience where I couldn't even hear what some of the characters were saying. And I was like, what the fuck is this shit? But yeah, I think the boss encounters were whatever. I do like the story. I think the story was good, albeit it was short. And I really hope chapter 4 is a little longer and scarier and there's more variety, although I don't know how there could be. But because we're really like running down this facility, man. Like this facility is getting cleaned out in a way. But I think it definitely had its good moments. And it said I really like the characters. I think the characters, especially Doey. Doey is my favorite. I think he's a very complex character. He's very cool. And sometimes the story is a little on the nose, but it's on the nose if you take the time to explore and figure out the lore and read everything, which I do enjoy. If you just go through this game, there's going to be a lot of shocks. If you read the lore, you're going to kind of know what's going on and what to expect, which I think is brilliant. I think they shouldn't shove it in your face. You should work for it and then you figure it out, which is great. But Doey was an amazing character. Seeing the underlying lore and seeing like a more divided sort of populace is really cool. And I don't want to get too much into it because I don't want to spoil, but overall on the story side it was great. On the gameplay side, I think there was much to be desired in terms of the horror aspect. And again, it could be because I was sick, it could be because I was just too good at games. I could maybe just be immune to horror now, although I doubt it. It's just maybe I'm just too used to Poppy. I think they kind of missed the mark gameplay wise, but story wise, it was great. So overall, if I had to give my big old fat rating of Poppy, I would probably say, all in all, sadly enough, and I don't remember what I rated chapter 3, because that's to me like probably one of the gold standards. Even though the boss fight, I have my opinions on that too, but I think that, and even with the final boss fight in this game too, it's a little confusing at times, again, what you're supposed to do, because there's no clear direction to the point where I had to repeat the boss fight because I thought it glitched out, but it didn't. And I was like, what the fuck? And thank goodness I was streaming and I had Twitch chat helping me because, like, there's certain points where I thought I was fucking up when I wasn't. And, hopefully no one has to deal with what I dealt with, but if you do, you're going to see what I mean. It's frustrating, especially when you have to redo the thing. And it's not like it's necessarily hard. Now, granted, it can't be hard. It has to be appealing to a wide audience to be successful, but still, regardless. I think overall, taking into account both the extremely good story and lore, despite it being short, and the suboptimal, subpar gameplay, which definitely the glitches and the bugs are not doing it any favors. I think overall, I would probably rate Poppy, Chapter 4 at least, probably like a 6.5 out of 10. I really think these things detracted. The amount of time that was in the DLC, especially for the cost, and just the amount of like almost, I would argue, game breaking bugs, which hopefully get ironed out over time, are definitely going to warrant the 6.5 out of 10 Doeys. If the bugs get fixed and if everything is like working properly, I would say it's probably like a 7.5. But until that happens, that's not sadly what I experienced, so I would probably rate this a 6.5. The lore really is good, but man, the gameplay was just like it almost felt like, okay, I'm just kind of going through it. It's not even scary. And if it's not scary, it's like I'm just sitting here just consuming lore, which is cool, but it's not what I'm fully playing Poppy for. Some of it is, but not all of it. But either way, that's my review. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you agree, if you disagree, let me know. And if you want to see more of me, watch me at Twitch TV/Tecnics channel. Woo, 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 woo.